Since June 15th of last year, I have maintained, because I was one of the ones who saw it from day one, that Donald Trump's primary purpose in this campaign was, well, two primary purposes. One, to destroy the Republican Party indefinitely. And two, and these are in no particular order, to guarantee that Hillary Clinton would be the next president of the United States. And nothing that I have seen since June the 15th of last year convinces me to the contrary. I knew it back then. I and many of us in the conservative remnant, the conservative Ronins, recognized that from the beginning. You know, I'm not just myself, but the good folks at National Review, the good folks at Red State, we saw it, and we said it, and nobody wanted to listen because it was all about anger and emotion and resentment, trying to bill itself or glorify itself as high moral purpose, high moral principle. And in the process, Trump and Trump mania have put Republicans in a race against the Democrats to dig the deeper grave. Because, of course, it's not like the Democrats have been trying to... it's not like they've been lighting things on fire. It's not like they've been on a roll. I mean, they nominated Hillary Clinton, for crying out loud. They really couldn't do any better than Hillary Clinton? Apparently they couldn't. Julian Castro was right there in front of them. And they nominated Hillary Clinton. So, I mean, the Democrats were begging to be defeated. I mean, their bench was so empty that Hillary Clinton was the best they could do. They're begging to be defeated. They're begging to spend 4 years on the sidelines so that they could come back. They're exhausted. But what do the Republicans do? The Republicans, how did Mona Charen put it in her syndicated column the other day? The GOP has sunk farther than the Democrats thanks to a full-on suicide that not even a novelist would have imagined. About 14 months ago, the American politics began to resemble a B-level Washington novel. A former Secretary of State is revealed to have endangered U.S. secrets and possibly sold aspects of U.S. foreign policy to the highest bidder. Will she face indictment? No. But the FBI chief acknowledges that the only way she could possibly attain a security clearance would be through her election as commander in squad. The writer might have come up with a more compelling character. Mrs. Clinton is robotic, shamelessly money-grubbing, calculating, secretive, and promiscuously deceitful. To the degree that she has any discernible principles at all, they're the wrong ones. When she raises her voice, which is often, the sound is like tires screeching. She represents the status quo in a change year. But as deep as the hole is that the Democrats have dug, the Republicans have bested them with a full-on suicide that, as I said before, was not even a novelist would ever have imagined. A mob of self-styled conservative activists, jumped up talk radio and TV hosts, Republican Party apparatchiks, and oh, does that word have new relevance, a plurality of primary voters and spineless elected officials across the fruitless plain has signed on with a repellent demagogue who will destroy the party at its moment of maximum opportunity. And now that it's too late, the rats are asking to be rescued from the sinking ship they helped to launch. Newt Gingrich, who hailed Trump's convention speech on July 22nd as a, quote, revolutionary moment, close quote, and reinforced Trump's reckless suggestion that NATO might not come to the aid of Estonia in the event of a Russian attack. You know, an attack on one NATO member is an attack on all. Remember that? Not that NATO could do anything if the Russians attacked Estonia, but at least not to directly save Estonia, but you get the idea. It's an alliance. And the attack on one, attack on all clause was in there from the beginning. When would that be? 67 years ago. But Gingrich reinforced Trump's reckless suggestion that NATO might not come to the aid of Estonia in the event of a Russian attack, among countless other lick-spittle bits of analysis, has discovered after Trump's terrible post-convention week that candidate Trump is unacceptable. Really? Gee, who saw that coming? Gingrich and other lackeys like Rudy Giuliani and Reince Priebus are reportedly planning an intervention to get the candidate to stop being Donald Trump. Yeah, right. And why now? Well, Trump's ignorance, malevolence, and instability have been on spectacular display for more than a year. Yet men and women of honor and sanity, formerly of honor and sanity, buckled into his cliff-destined train.
Come on! Nice and easy! Don't look down! That's it! You're doing fine!
There is no doubt that Trump has been at his Trumpiest lately. He committed outrages against decency, the truth, and even his own best political interests at about twice his normal rate. In addition to dishonoring and insulting a Gold Star couple and keeping up the feud for days, when he might have been discussing the dismal economic numbers or Hillary Clinton's latest rafter of lies about her email scandal, he vocally fantasized about punching out the speakers at the Democrat National Convention, lied about his relationship with Vladimir Putin, though his previous lie was on videotape. So in other words, he lied about his previous lie about his relationship with Vladimir Putin. Threatened to fund challengers to fellow Republicans Ted Cruz and John Kasich to punish their disloyalty. Hey, was that a good facial impression of Donald Trump? Claimed that he had received a letter from the National Football League complaining about the debate schedule. Of course, the NFL denied it. He made it all up, in other words. Like anybody is going to watch a presidential debate instead of NFL football. Assured an interviewer that Putin's not going into Ukraine, okay? Only to discover and issue a corrective tweet later when he remembered, or somebody told him, that Putin was already in Crimea and has been for the last 2.5 years. He claimed that he turned down a meeting with the Koch brothers, which is also false. Now, Trump is bad at eyelashes at Speaker Paul Ryan's primary opponent, and mused that he would not support Senators Kelly Ayotte and John McCain, and then flip-flopped and grudgingly went to Green Bay, Wisconsin last Friday and grudgingly endorsed Speaker Ryan and Senator McCain, although not yet Senator Ayotte, I'm hastening to add. And it was hilarious because there was nobody on the stage with him. Ryan didn't show up. He didn't want to be anywhere near him. Not even Governor Scott Walker showed up. And remember, Scott Walker gave a fairly impassioned speech on Trump's behalf at the Trump benching too. But Governor Walker was nowhere to be found. Senator Ron Johnson was nowhere he wasn't even on the same planet, which is pretty much like any other Republican candidate this cycle. Besides, Ron Johnson's doomed anyway. He's like 10 points behind Fussy Rusty Feingold. But, there's your party leader, Republicans. You nominated a Democrat to be the Republican presidential nominee. Well done, Trumplicans. Martha Bales reminds us in the Claremont Review of Books of two barrels. One contains sewage, the other wine. If you pour a cup of wine into the sewage, it's still sewage. But if you pour a cup of sewage into the wine, it is no longer wine, but sewage. Trump is a pathogen. That's a disease for those of you in Malaga, Washington. A man who heedlessly promotes conspiracy theories, like vaccines cause autism, Obama was born in Kenya, Bush lied us into war in Iraq, Rafael Cruz was caught up in the JFK assassination, etc., etc., etc. He either is not fully sane or at least indifferent to the demoralizing effect that such lies have on our social cohesion. And of course, Trump is all about social cohesion. His idea of social cohesion is his personal Vietnam, if you will recall. A man whose confidence is so shaky that he must attest to his own intelligence, malign even the most insignificant critic, scapegoat minorities, and threaten the free press is to be pitied, maybe. Like in any other quantum reality, Donald Trump is the wino sitting on the park bench muttering to himself. In fact, if you go find a wino on any park bench in a large metropolitan area sitting there muttering to himself, give him a few $100 million and a top-of-the-line wardrobe, and you got Donald Trump, ladies and gentlemen. But he's not to be trusted with power. He is very, very comfortable stoking mobs and threatening violence. His warning that there would be riots in Cleveland if he failed to get the Republican nomination, to cite just one of the thousands of ways he has transgressed basic civil norms this year, ought to have been enough to activate the antibodies of a healthy electorate. Every single Republican with influence, from the local sheriff to the Speaker of the House, at every stage of this process, should have stood up on his hind legs and denounced this fraud. Where are his tax returns again? The ones that show that he's not a billionaire and that he's so far up Vladimir Putin's ass that he can see the borscht that he consumed for breakfast this morning. Condemned his ugly methods and scorned his flood of lies. In other words, the Republican Party has no honor, just like it has no brains. Every Republican should have lined up for Judge Curiel. Every Republican should have lined up behind Ted Cruz. Chris Christie's endorsement was the first tablespoon of sewage. Jeff Sessions was the second. The list of defilers is too long to itemize now. So rest in peace, GOP. And what happens with the Republican Party functionally laid waste? Well, pretty much what happened to this country when the Federalists went away in the early 1800s, and then the Whigs went away in the mid-1800s. America becomes a one-party state. And even now, that's the case. because the Democrats nominated a Democrat for their presidential candidacy, their presidential nomination, and the Republicans also nominated a Democrat. David Harse and I expanded and expounded upon this last Friday at nationalreview.com. I mean, the real political tragedy of Donald Trump isn't only that he's annihilating the Republican Party, which, let's face it, was the stated point of his campaign when it started, and a lot of the Republican, so-called Republican base cheered him on. Burn it down! Burn it down! Congratulations, he succeeded. And now Hillary Clinton's going to be the next president of the United States. Which makes every time a Trumplican says, well, but Hillary! You wanted to stop Hillary? You shouldn't have nominated Donald Trump. You have no way out of this, Trumplicans. Absolutely, positively none. Understand that. Come to grips with it. Learn it, live it, love it, because we're never going to let you forget it. Trump says odious and dangerous things all the time. It's that his presence allows most of the media to ignore the corruption, recklessness, and policy failures of Democrats who now function without any genuine ideological opposition. Now, that's not to say that the media wouldn't ignore the corruption, recklessness, and policy failures of Democrats anyway, but now Trump has given them the perfect excuse to do so. Trump is worse than Hillary. So they're going to, and since Trump is supposedly way more entertaining than Hillary, now they have a ready-made, gold-plated excuse to ignore the Democrats, to ignore Hillary Clinton's mountain of scandals, her unlikability, her abrasiveness, the fact that she is the worst, arguably the worst presidential candidate, certainly of the modern era, maybe ever. I mean, Trump is running interference for Hillary Clinton. He's giving her media cover. He is allowing her to run the only kind of campaign that could be successful for her and that should be impossible in the modern mass communications age. She is hiding. She is reducing, minimizing her visibility. That shouldn't be possible in this day and age. But she's doing it, and Trump is her enabler. I mean, she is running as the I am not Trump, the not Trump, the anti-Trump. That's how she's running. This election is a referendum on Donald Trump, not Hillary Clinton. And Hillary Clinton is running as the de facto incumbent. Do you realize the insanity of what you've done, Trump supporters? I think some of you do, but you won't admit it. In fact, the ones who do realize it and won't admit it are the ones who are the most strident in saying, but we got to stop Hillary! Talk about counterintuitive. Counterintuition. This past week offered a vivid example of this dynamic. Trump, allegedly a tell-it-like-it-is tough guy, is adept at nicknaming his enemies, in like 7th grade style, but lacks any comprehension of long-standing ideological debates in this country. In other words, he's great at personal insults, but knows nothing about politics. That's what you wanted. You wanted an outsider. Someone who didn't know crap about politics. Didn't know anything, didn't know what he was doing, but gosh darn it, he was entertaining and he insulted the people you couldn't stand. Welcome to populism, folks. People love to complain about the duopoly, the two-party system. And that's another irony. Remember that expression, well, there's not a dime's worth of difference between the two parties. That was never true. Ever. Until now. And the irony is that the people who said and bitched and moaned and complained that there was not a dime's worth of difference between the two parties are the ones who have made that reality come true. I mean, the problem, the conflict, the GOP civil war between what became Trumplicans and the so-called establishment was always one of tactics. It was never one of ideology. Never one of ideology. It was always about tactics, and it's fitting that Trumplicans would throw the principles they claim to hold dear overboard just to raise spite and anger and vindictiveness and resentment, as I said previously, to the status of a high moral principle. So people love to complain about the two-party system, but it doesn't exist solely because plutocrats prefer it. It developed on its own. The Founding Fathers didn't want a two-party system. They thought we could just all come together for the good of the country. And even in their generation, a two-party system developed. That's human nature. Factionalism, as the founders referred to a two-party system, political parties, etc., that factionalism is human nature. I don't agree with you on these things. I can't line up with you. And then because not everybody agrees with everybody else, it's very rare when you find somebody who agrees with you 100% down the line, so then you tend to make coalition, make common purpose with people who agree with you most of the time against those who agree with you little or none of the time. Welcome to political parties, the two-party system. It's just human nature. It developed on its own. It wasn't a plot, the Illuminati. It wasn't something that was cooked up in a smoke-filled back room by rich guys that looked like the Monopoly Man. There's a real-life, organic, right-left cultural and economic divide in this country that has evolved since the beginning of the country. While the plight of the white working class is important, there's a lot more to this argument. One side still clings to partisanship but has abandoned the philosophical debate and therefore the reason for that partisanship in the first place. If you no longer disagree with the other side, with their ideas, if you forfeited your own ideas, what reason do you have to not join their party? Why do we need a second Democrat Party, Trumplicans? Because that's what you've given us. When Trump was told this last week that Hillary Clinton once unveiled a massive infrastructure plan, in other words, her version of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, including a state-run infrastructure bank, how did Donald Trump retort? Did he, A, make an argument for fiscal responsibility and say, we can't afford that, we've already got a $19 trillion national debt? Or did he offer an alternative, a return to supply-side economics? Cut taxes, cut spending especially, reduce the size of government, remove the crushing burden on the backs of the collapsing American economy and private sector? Or did he see her infrastructure offer and double it? An even bigger American Recovery and Reinvestment Act sequel? You know the answer. The answer is C. Saying, well, I would say at least double her numbers, and you're going to need really more than that. Before repeating a slew of liberal shibboleths about how the country is falling apart. Yeah, it's falling apart now. Culturally, politically. I mean, if Trump loves debt, and he does, remember his track record, his pattern, enter an industry, start up a business, borrow a ton of money at usurious interest rates, ride it into the ground and parachute clear before impact and is off to the next scam. That's what this campaign is. Going to leave the Republican Party in ruins. It's already in ruins, to be quite honest with you. But if Trump loves debt, how can you be critical of Hillary Clinton? Have you thought about that, Trumplicans? We gotta stop Hillary, but Trump is proposing not just more of the same. Well, yeah. Now Trump is not just proposing the same as Hillary Clinton. He's promising more of it. He's promising everything Hillary Clinton is promising. So how can you say, well, we got to stop Hillary, when Trump is doing the same things, promising, offering the same thing? If Trump is proposing more of what Hillary Clinton is promising than she is, how can you be critical of Hillary? Wouldn't, on a lesser of two evils basis, wouldn't that make Hillary Clinton the lesser of the two evils? Numbers don't lie, folks. And because of that, a majority of Republicans are now powerless to make a case against another American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, another huge gusher of deficit spending. We've already got an almost $20 trillion national debt, but here we go with some more, courtesy of the Republican nominee. Now, majority of Republicans have no credibility because they nominated somebody just as bad, if not worse, than Hillary Clinton. Now, those of us in the conservative remnant, true conservatives, the conservative Ronins, we can make the case against this horrifying repeat of mistakes from recent history, from the era of the one. We can make it because we haven't forfeited our principles. We're not supporting a liberal Democrat, a national socialist. So Republicans can't talk about any of this because they've forfeited their credibility. They've nominated a liberal Democrat. So how can they make a case against Hillary Clinton's stimulus plan when Trump's is twice as big? So instead, we focus on crying babies and an aggrieved Gold Star family, which, by the way, makes it far more difficult to debate the genuine problems with allowing in unvetted Muslim immigrants from war-torn nations, which, of course, is exactly why the Democrats rolled out the Khan family at the Democrat convention. I said it before, I'll say it again. The Trump campaign should have said two sentences. One, we are very sorry for your loss. Two, we honor your son's service and sacrifice for our country, and moved on. If they were going to say anything about it. That was a gotcha. It was an elementary level PR tiger trap, and Trump just dived headlong into it and kept impaling himself on the spikes in the pit below, figuratively speaking. Now, we focus on this minutia that has nothing to do with the future of the country because Trump he's gifted the Democrats with the higher moral ground. And that, of course, is one of his two primary purposes for being in the race. And the two purposes reinforce each other, to make Hillary Clinton the next president of the United States. And if Trump somehow managed to win against all odds and probabilities, then this would go on for 4 or 8 years, or maybe longer. And you know what? Democrats would be happy to focus on his personal scraps, vendettas, and scandals at the expense of legitimate debate, and why wouldn't they? I mean, Donald Trump is the biggest gift to the Democrats that the Republicans have ever offered up, at least since Watergate. Watergate is the only thing that may possibly be in the league, anywhere near as big a disaster for the GOP and gift to the Democrats. This week, for example, this past week, Barack Obama authorized a month of airstrikes against ISIS in Libya. We didn't hear anything about that in the press, did we? I mean, think about this. Think about this for a moment. If a President George W. Bush were bombing a country using a decade-old authorization of military force that has nothing to do with Libya, the event would consume the news cycle, forcing politicians to answer some tough questions, and rightly so. But we didn't hear anything about it. And we know why, don't we? Because of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is giving Barack Obama cover to do God knows what over the next 6 months, certainly in the next 3. He's giving Hillary Clinton cover. He's running interference for her to get her elected in the only way that she can. Open your eyes, Trump supporters! And political implications are now being ignored. I imagine most Republicans support these bombing efforts, but Mrs. Clinton has claimed she was the chief architect of our original intervention in Libya. Remember Operation Lead from Behind? She was the one who urged Obama, over the strong misgivings of others, to intervene. Actually, Mrs. Clinton has claimed that the UN-authorized Libyan air campaign in 2011 was a model of successful foreign intervention. Turning Libya over to ISIS is a successful model of overseas intervention. That's what Hillary Clinton thinks. She maintains that her decisions as Secretary of State have prepared her to be commander-in-squaw. Now, I realize that Trump is supposedly against intervention, although, paradoxically, he's constantly claiming he would annihilate ISIS with nuclear weapons. The problem is that today we're talking about how Trump reportedly asked numerous times during an hour-long briefing why America can't use nuclear weapons, making Mrs. Clinton seem like the rational one. It's like P.J. O'Rourke put it not too long ago. Hillary Clinton is crazy, but she's conventional crazy. She's crazy, but she doesn't look or sound crazy. Trump actually looks and sounds crazy in addition to being crazy. The Wall Street Journal recently reported that the Obama administration airlifted $400 million in cash to Iran. But you didn't hear much about that other than Trump. What was that sequence of events? First, he said he saw a top secret video of it. Then he said, "Oh well, okay, it was on Fox News." And then it wasn't. It was a video of America. I think it was the 10 American sailors that the Iranians captured back in January coming off a plane. I mean, aside from Trump blabbing about it, nobody would have heard anything about it. That $400 million infusion from the ransom, let's just call it what it was, which coincided with the release of 4 American hostages in Tehran. Okay, these are other hostages. Wooden pallets stacked with euros, Swiss francs, and other currencies were flown into Iran on an unmarked cargo plane, according to these officials, the story reads. Considering what we already know about Obama's penchant for empowering the Iranians, it's not surprising. The idea that the United States secretly paid off a state that sponsors terrorism and holds American servicemen hostage should be a huge story. Instead, the media can readjust their focus and talk about how the Republican nominee is facing fraud and racketeering charges, among others, for his role as founder of Trump University. Yeah, that's right, folks. That's right, Trumplicans. You've nominated a criminal. It's partly the media. Oh yeah, unconvicted as yet criminal. And it's only partly the media's fault, too. Of course, most of them would rather talk about Trump than Obama or Hillary. That is what Trump was supposedly going to overcome, but which Trump is actually in this race to facilitate. You know, lately one of my favorite pastimes is watching journalists pretend they didn't want Trump to be the GOP nominee and say his presidency would be bad for the country. And of course, that's such a transparent lie that it's more like a taunt. Because the media wanted Donald Trump to be the GOP nominee. They wanted to impose Donald Trump on the GOP as its presidential nominee, the same way the media does every single presidential cycle. They always try to shove down Republican throats the candidate the media wants to see, which, in other words, is the weakest candidate against the Democrats, to maximize the chances of Democrat presidential victory. And they've hit the jackpot with Donald Trump. Why do you think the media gave him $2 billion worth of free airtime? Again, connect the dots, Trumplicans. They didn't just do it because he's entertaining. They knew that Donald Trump was the only Republican candidate that Hillary Clinton had a prayer of defeating. By the way, Hillary Clinton's up 7 points on the Real Clear Politics average. Just saying. Trump offers the best of both worlds for the media. He's great for ratings and terrible for Republicans. That's a twofer. This contention, I've been told, is a conspiracy theory. No, it's reality. It's been reality for a long time. It's never been more obvious. And never have so many Republicans blinded themselves to it. It's almost like they've got that Vulcan nictating membrane, that inner eyelid. The Trump advocacy was taken on by many individual outlets acting completely on their own, out in the open, because it really wasn't all that difficult to figure out. Except for Trumplicans, of course. That Kool-Aid, you know. A report from the Harvard University Kennedy School Shorenstein Center on Media, Politics, and Public Policy, boy, that's a mouthful, which analyzed all the major traditional print and broadcast outlets, states that positive media coverage of Trump in 2015 gave him a huge boost during the primaries. Any reasonable person can see that the coverage has radically shifted since he became the nominee, and anybody with 3 brain cells to rub together could have seen that coming, because it happens every single time. But Republicans made that possible. While the GOP candidate still has the support of loyal partisans, you know, about 10% of the electorate, or those who believe Mrs. Clinton is unacceptable no matter who the Republican nominee is. And I'll tell you what, that you had to go an extraordinary distance to make that formulation invalid. Trumplicans managed to do it. The nation is really left with only one party. That's the practical effect of it, folks. While Republicans fight rearguard actions against true conservatives, clean up their candidates' messes, which is a Sisyphean task, and rationalize his nonsense, Democrats have the field to themselves. And that's a dangerous event in a free nation for 2 reasons. 1, because it guarantees that Hillary Clinton will be the next president of the United States, and 2, there will be no Republican Party to oppose her for all intents and purposes. And after all this is over, next winter, you talk about the winter of discontent, after all this is over, I'm telling you, Trumplicans, some of you are going to wake up as if from a bender, as if from a a nightmare. And you're going to say what Magneto said at the end of X-Men 3: The Last Stand. My God, what have we done?